Here we go. Are you thinking about starting a practice, but you feel just too busy, don't have the time? It's a common feeling, but is that how you're feeling? Well, my guest today has some inspiration for you. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they want, but I really believe that care is better when it's just you and your provider sitting at the table trying to figure out what's best for you, and nobody else secretly whispering in your provider's ear what their needs or their agenda is. Not a hospital, not a health system, not owners in faraway lands, whoever they may be. It's just you and your provider. And today, my guest is Dr. Brook Choulet. Brook is a board-certified concierge psychiatrist and physician business consultant. In addition to seeing adolescents, Dr. Choulet specializes in executive performance and sports psychiatry. She's passionate about helping high achievers optimize their mental health and enhance their well-being. Dr. Choulet founded Choulet Wellness, Scottsdale Concierge Psychiatry and Therapy, and co-founded Jolla Concierge Psychiatry. Dr. Choulet started her private practice in 2020, and within 1 year, she's hired over 6 other clinicians to join her at Choulet Wellness. She's rapidly expanding both practices in Arizona and California. As a business consultant, Dr. Choulet has been able to help several psychiatrists across the country start and grow their private practices. She has a passion for helping other physicians identify their career goals and grow their own clinics. She's an expert in time management and efficiency, and she started and expanded both of her practice while still in fellowship training. That's what we're going to talk about today. Brook Choulet, thanks for taking a few minutes to come on Practice Care.
Thanks for inviting me on today.
Yeah, it is great to have you. And kind of let's start and get into it. You know, private practice, we all know, owning any business, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and long nights of just building it. But even before doing all that, while employed, there's the inspiration to go into private practice first. And the reason I wanted to ask you what your inspiration is it's not easy to start a private practice, certainly not today like it used to be. The trend is kind of going in the opposite direction. So what was the inspiration for you to start a private practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, it was really twofold. One is that my mom is also a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, and she's located in San Diego and has been doing private practice for over 20 years. And I really appreciated the flexibility in her work schedule and being around when my brother and I were growing up. And that was something that was important to me for when I have kids. And then the second reason was when I was in medical school and training, I looked around at the hospital employed physicians, and while it's an extremely stable and predictable model of employment, I just did not like the way that healthcare was going in terms of insurance dictating kind of patient care and prior authorizations and just making it really difficult for patients to get good care.
Yes, and you could join the chorus of other guests that we've had on, and everybody who's faced that. We had a different guest who she described a situation where a patient came in and the leg needed to be sutured, and then she had to fight for 6 months because she's not a surgeon. She's like,
Oh my gosh.
Primary care doctor, should I have just let the guy bleed out? I mean, seriously, and there's the poster child example. So the inspiration's there, and then you start to build your practice. I think a lot of people, sometimes we stand at the starting line of something really big and inspiring, but we don't know what to do. So what did you do? What are some of the things you did first when you were building out your practice?
So the first thing was really creating a vision of what I wanted to do, because I often tell people it's hard to want to start something if you have no idea kind of what you're wanting to do. People tell me all the time, well, I know I don't like my current job and I want to start my own practice. Well, what does that actually look like? So for me, I started with a vision of what I wanted to do. And I guess you could call it a loose business plan. But for me, it was really kind of wanting to start and grow a practice while I was in fellowship, as you mentioned, so that when I graduated fellowship, I could have a seamless job transition without needing additional hospital employment or per diem work. And I really wanted to create a multidisciplinary group where people could come seek mental health services of all kinds and have psychiatry, psychology, counseling, all of these things under one roof. And so the first thing I did was I started to do market research on who was in my area, where they were located, what they were charging, and really become as well informed as possible about what was going on in the area, just to see if there would even be a market for this. So in terms of the tangibles, the first thing I did really was I started moonlighting so I could have funds to start this practice. So in the
Practical.
background, yes, I did not want to take out a small business loan. And then I really started working on getting a website together, getting a corporation legally put together, and getting
Mhm.
a bank account open. And those were kind of the three first steps that I took.
Wow. And you did all this and more while you were working full time. So
Yes.
that's the advice, right? If you're thinking, especially if you're thinking of starting something, if you're going from one job to another, different story. But if you're thinking of starting your own thing, all the advice that I heard when I was getting ready was, boy, Carl, if you could grab a few clients, this is in the business side, before you leave, that'd be ideal for all the right reasons. And I thought, yeah, I can't disagree. I don't know when, because I have a full-time job. Brooke, how did you do this? I mean, how'd you do
Yeah.
it?
I think about that all the time. But I would say,
You
in
sleep? Like
people that
what? I
have,
mean, how do you do market research? Everybody's asleep.
right. I think the challenge was obviously, like other physicians out there know, in residency and fellowship, you're working 8 to 5, if not a lot more in some subspecialties. So really, I would wake up really early. I'd wake up at like 5:30 a.m., get a few hours in before I went to work. I would pretty much not, I didn't go out for a year. I was working late at night, during dinner, after dinner, trying to put all these things together just so that I could really have initiative to not be hospital employed as soon as I graduated.
Right.
And I think the biggest mistake, or not mistake, but I think the biggest thing that I see people struggle with when they're full-time employed and they come to me for consulting looking to switch into private practice is just lacking that extra kind of initiative to put in the time before and after hours, because it's really easy to feel like we don't have time to do
Yeah.
things. And this is a conversation I have with my patients all the time about just habits of like incorporating exercise and certain habits. And it's a matter of kind of making the time for things that are important to you, whether it be 20 minutes a day, an hour a day, or whatever you could give to it will be helpful.
Yeah. And there's the euphoria of, oh my God, I'm going to do this. And now it's 3 months later or 6 months later, and it's Saturday night at 11, and you have to go work on it. And the euphoria is gone, and you still have to pound it
Mhm.
out. You just do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's hard for people too, is when they have a vague goal of like, well, I want to start a private practice. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. But how do you actually achieve that? And setting smart, kind of measurable and really specific goals of, I
Yeah.
want to have the bank account open and a consult with an attorney by the end of the month. And then the
Hmm.
next month, maybe seeking website services and signing for that. So I think it really needs to be tangible steps that people are taking
Yeah.
in order to achieve the big picture.
Yeah. And one thing I've learned is this is the way I used to say it. I would start 6 things, yeah, but finish none of them because the list was too long. Now I'm pick one or two things and get them
Mhm.
done. It feels a lot better. It just feels a lot better. Another, I'm not going to ask you about this, but just a point you made is it sounds like you weren't running away from a job. You were running towards something that was exciting. And sometimes when you said earlier, I hate where I am, so I'm going to go start a practice. Well, that's not necessarily any better. You've got to want where you're going to and not just want to escape from where you're from. And so anybody
Mhm.
who's thinking about this, just have a look at yourself and make sure that you're going where you want to go rather than just trying to escape where you are. Um, how did
Right.
you happen upon because they're, form a corporation, open a bank account, get a website going, and there's probably a long list, of other things to
Mhm.
add to that list. Where did you get the advice, or did you just, maybe it wasn't advice, you just kind of knew it, but that's a good starting list. How did you come upon, that's, I think, where people get stuck is, what do I do first?
Right. I think it was a lot of kind of trial and error. So there were some things I chose to do on my own, like in Arizona, it's pretty easy to make an LLC online. I had to look at a bunch of articles about it, but I figured it out. Whereas other things, everyone should just outsource to people that are specialized in these things, like an attorney who knows the healthcare laws.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times doctors are asking, like, well, how'd you find the law on this? I'm like, we don't have time to do that. Like, go talk to an attorney, who this is all they do. So I think, getting an attorney, getting an accountant that are kind of your go-to people, and you build a small team, because between the three of you, you can all kind of figure out the next steps of what to do.
Yeah. And those are good places to start, right? So if you don't know where to start, you need a legal entity to start with. And a good, by the way, a business attorney and a healthcare attorney are not the same. There is some overlap, but a business attorney, general business attorney, likely will not know the specialized part of the healthcare law that's going to apply to you, like HIPAA and a bunch of other things. So look for a healthcare attorney. And, when you're talking to them, one thing you can ask them is, I'm going to need other services. How's your network? Because maybe they can help you find people. You don't even know what you don't know. So I'm curious, how long from, the day you said, I'm going to do this, to the day you open your doors, about how much time was it? Because it was pre-pandemic when you started all this, right?
Yes, so I started July of 2020, kind of putting things together and starting to build things in the background while I was in fellowship. And then July 1st of 2021 is the day I opened and saw my first patient.
But the concept of, I'm going to do this, did that hit you, before the pandemic?
Yes, that hit me before the pandemic. I had been itching to get started while I was in residency, and I just was not board eligible to start seeing patients on my own. So I kept thinking, what can I do in the background? So I
Right.
would say from probably the beginning of my third year of residency is when I started to really think about these things.
Got it. And did the pandemic make you wonder, make you rethink, or you just said, nope, going forward?
Looking back, I probably should have rethought things,
What,
but I was
really?
in such a zone of I just want to do this, and luckily it worked out well, because during COVID there was a mass exodus of therapists and psychiatrists from the office to telehealth, and it was nearly impossible to find an in-person psychiatrist or therapist. And I think that's what really allowed us to kind of flourish, was that my husband was a hospitalist working in the ICU, so I'm like, if he's coming home and sleeping next to me, I'm going to be safe sitting 6 feet away from someone in a small
Yeah, good
office, and I'm
point.
not even touching them. So, I think for me it was a pretty easy answer of, this is how I can be different, and this is how I could stand out during the pandemic.
Right. And just to explore like another option that you may have been viable, you'll tell me if it wasn't, but you chose not to, is, did you think about going to like work in somebody else's private practice for a while and just kind of build a patient
I didn't,
base, see the ropes,
yeah.
anything like that? No?
I did not, because I don't like being told what to do, and I wanted to
Uh,
make my own rules. And so, for me, that was never really even something I considered, was joining something else. I just really had no interest in that. And I'm like, I'm either going to make this work, or I'm going to have to go to hospital employment.
got it. Got it. Okay. So you started up with, and you know yourself well. I don't think most people know themselves as clearly as it sounds like you know yourself on these big things. Like, I just
Mhm.
don't like I don't like listening. I don't want to be told what to do. So I need to run the ship. I think there's another thing. If you're not sure about yourself in these areas, please, have a look in the mirror. Um,
Yeah.
has your practice changed much from when you started? I mean, you had a vision, you had a picture. Is it pretty much what you thought, or has it changed and grown? I think the reason I ask is, another thing that I think can stop people up is, well, since I can't see the whole 30, 35-year path, I don't know what it looks like, I'm not going to start. And
Mhm.
that's not the way to go. But what was it like for you? What's it like now compared to what you thought?
Right. It's a really interesting question, because, like you said, everyone goes into these things having a vision and having an idea of what they want to do. And initially, I would say I thought that I would incorporate more other kind of smaller services, like maybe in-house massage therapy, or, other things like that. We tried having a nurse that offered Botox and microneedling. And what we quickly found is that there's such a need for mental health care, that really it just strictly turned into psychiatry, psychology, and therapy services. So I
Okay.
would say that was the biggest change. I mean, it's for the better. We're able to serve more people, but I initially thought we would be doing kind of several different things. And then I think the market quickly tells you what you're kind of most sought after for.
Yeah. And so you never quite know till you try, right? So I
Mhm.
think the lesson that you're telling us is, if you're not sure, try it. As long as it wouldn't, break the practice if it failed. Try it and just listen. And if you have to stop it, at least you know. You're never going to know until you try
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool. Brooke, so interesting. I mean, I've been waiting for a while to have you come on because, it's hard enough to start a practice and then you did it while employed. I kind of want people to hear it because if that's what they're telling themselves, oh, I'll do it tomorrow or I'll do it when the conditions are right. No, they're not going to be perfect. So if you're hearing Brooke, the lesson is get going. Just get going because, then you'll find out. Are there any, in the interest of kind of bringing us in, because we could talk for a long time, but kind of bringing us to the finish line, is there anything you think I should have asked you that's relevant that you think our listeners need to hear about that I just didn't ask you about?
I think we covered a lot of things, but I will add that I think don't let fear or don't let what other people tell you kind of make you second guess yourself and sway you in your decisions, because there were a lot of people that told me I would fail, I was doing it wrong, I would not succeed. I'll never forget.
Really?
I went to a conference last year, and someone looked me in the eye and said, "Thanks for explaining what your model is and what you're going to do. I just don't think it'll work." And so I
But it
think it's
already
real
was.
important. It had been open for a few months at that
Oh,
point. So
okay.
obviously you still have some nerves of, will this work? Will this not? But I think that's my biggest takeaway is that if you have a clear idea of what you want to do and you're doing it in a smart way, you're not blowing all of your money on overhead costs. I think, just don't let other people try and sway you from the decision you've made.
Sure, 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 sure. Um, that's so funny. As you were saying that, I'm thinking, but you don't think it worked for you, buddy, whoever you were, but who are you to say? Um, and then the other wrap-up question I always ask is, for those listening, you've caught their attention, they're in a situation that you were in. Are there one or two tangible steps you'd recommend that they take as soon as they're done listening
Yeah,
to get going?
Yeah, I think one is kind of market research, just seeing if people even do what you're striving to do in your area. And then another thing is, like I said, contact an attorney and an accountant, run your ideas by them. And if all of this seems too much and you just don't think you have the time for it, then there's so many consulting groups out there that will help you start a private practice and like you offer, and kind of being able to help set up a turnkey practice. So I think that there's a lot of ways to achieve the same end goal.
Yeah. And on the market research, I'll just throw in a quick plug. When in all other things being equal, pick the size of the city that you're in matters. Google's
Mhm.
algorithm says whenever somebody searches for something, they want what's geographically closest to them. And and inside the same city. So there's some biases for being in the same place and even being in the next town over is against. So there's more to that story, but I've got one client, they're in a small town next to a larger city, and I just wish 1 mile over and they'd have it, you know what I mean? So it's just,
Right.
but yes, add that to the list. So good. Well, Brooke, thank you on this for sharing kind of a whirlwind tour on how you did this. I feel like we got some depth, but man, we could have you back 2 or 3 more times and just keep digging on what your
I
experience
appreciate
was.
it.
Yeah, and it's just been really really helpful. I hope you caught somebody's attention on get going, don't wait. So thank you again, once again. We've had Dr. Brook Choulet with Choulet Wellness and Scottsdale Concierge Psychiatry and Therapy. Thank you for coming on. All of your contact info that you supplied will be in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you and pick your brain, they can do it. And a couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you've had an experience with the business side of your practice like Brooke has, or if you service private practices like I do, and you've got some experience that you think others would benefit from hearing about private practice owners, please, we want you to come on Practice Care. In the show notes for this and every episode are instructions on how to apply. Tell us what's on your mind so that we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, please subscribe to Practice Care on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks very much, and until next time.